Especially want to thank Phyllis Laslett and Megan Compton, who have handled the registration for our 3,000 plus audience. I think we're just under 3,100, and I don't know that we could do it without them. So thanks again to Louis Skinner. Our MC tonight is Nicole Hirsch, and Nicole is with the New River Valley Regional Commission. And Nicole is the coordinator of the new Plant Southwest Virginia Natives campaign. Helping Beth Mizell respond to as many of your questions as is possible tonight will be Joanne Hutton with the Plant Nova Natives campaign. And Joanne is also a master naturalist and master gardener. Lisa Hamilton with the Plant RVA Natives campaign and the Virginia Native Plant Society, and also a Henrico master gardener, and also Nancy Veers with the Virginia Native Plant Society. So thank you so much to these partners for being with us tonight to help conduct this webinar. And I also wanted to thank and acknowledge the many Plant Virginia Natives partners who helped to plan this event at the outset. And finally, thank you, our audience, because this wouldn't happen without your engagement. And we really, really appreciate having your ear and sharing all the information, this information with you, and again, learning along with you. So there's a little housekeeping that we need to keep in mind. And so I want to turn this over now to Phyllis.
Thank you, Virginia. You all are not going to see me. You are going to hear me. One thing I wanted to mention to you all before we get into sort of the ground rules for using Zoom webinar is to mention a program that may be of interest to many of you at Louis Ginter next Friday called Humans in the Landscape, Heal the Land, Heal Ourselves. And you can find details on it by going to louisginter.org and typing Humans in the Landscape into the search. This is a half-day exploration of how we humans both act upon the landscape and the landscape acts upon us. And it touches on physical aspects of the landscape and spiritual aspects. So I hope you'll take a quick look at that and consider joining us. It's you have an option to join, either come to the garden physically, or we do have an online live version of it. If you sign up for the online version, you will receive a recording of the presentations. So again, please consider that, and thank you. To housekeeping. I'm waiting for my slide to come up. For those of you who are used to Zoom webinar or don't use it very often, I'm still going to do a little review. We're really happy to have you all with us tonight. Here are a few housekeeping tips and reminders. In webinar, which is different from Zoom meeting, your audio and video are muted. We'll walk you through how to use the toolbar to communicate. There are a lot of you in these webinars. We have, right now, we're right at 500 people. So in order to keep track of you all, we're asking everyone to use the Q&A function to ask questions. If you take a look at the Zoom toolbar, you can, and to find that, you need to hover your cursor over the Zoom window or click the menu bar if you are on a smartphone. And on that toolbar from the left, you'll see your mute and your start your video feed, which is not on during webinar. And then you'll see the Q&A button, and we're asking people to use the Q&A button to ask questions. This is your primary means of communication with the host and panelists. Please note that, this is confusing, and I wish them would revise their words. When we note that a question is to be answered live, that means it will be answered in the break and not at that moment. So please have patience, your question will be addressed. Next, you'll see the chat button. The chat is disabled during the webinar because it's a lot harder to keep track of questions there. We, the hosts and panelists, can still use the chat to communicate with you, but you will not be able to use it once we start the program. Again, using the Q&A enables us to keep track of which questions have been answered. However, we may use the chat to update you or clarify closed captioning. Take note of the raise hand button. This has also been turned off because, again, it's very hard to keep track of people in that particular function, and we don't want to lose you. Finally, we've enabled closed captioning function in Zoom. If you need this aid, you can click on the CC icon and select subtitles. It's pretty good, but we will clarify as needed in the chat because the service does not recognize botanical nomenclature. We tried, it doesn't. If you're using a PC, you can turn this function off, but it cannot be turned off for mobile devices like smartphones or tablets, and I'm sorry that that's the way it works. We are going to end tonight's program promptly at 8:10 p.m. A reminder that we are recording this session and we'll send a link to the recording in the week following the event. At the end of the webinar series in November, all available recordings will be posted to the Plant Virginia natives. Thank you, and back over to Virginia.
And I'm going to promptly turn this over to our MC for the evening, Nicole Hirsch, and she's going to introduce our speaker tonight.
Thank you, fellows and Virginia. I'm very pleased to introduce our speaker this evening. Elizabeth Mizell is the program director for Blue Ridge Prism, a nonprofit dedicated to reducing the impacts of invasive species in the northern Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. Prior to moving to Virginia in 2016 and starting a small business, Beth was a land steward with the Nature Conservancy for 14 years, caring for natural areas and restoring rare natural communities. She has extensive experience in natural areas management and restoration, invasive plant species management and control, native plant propagation, and gardening and landscaping with native plants. Beth is a level 1 Chesapeake Bay landscape professional and holds a license as a Virginia commercial pesticide applicator. Beth also has been instrumental in planning and conducting this webinar series. Thanks so much for that, Beth. And without further ado, I turn the mic over.
Oh, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Nicole. Bear with me while I get my presentation queued up for you all. Okay. So it's not on the start page. There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here this evening and for having me back as part of the Landscaping with Virginia Natives webinar series. I'm delighted to be here and talk to you again about invasive plants in Virginia, what we can do about them, and help you to learn some how to identify some of them in the fall. So thanks again. And without further ado, I will go ahead and get started. And let's see what, there we go. Okay, so first I'd like to take a few moments to introduce you to Blue Ridge Prism, or Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management. PRISM was founded in 2014 as a project of the Shenandoah National Park Trust. In 2020, PRISM became an independent 501c3 public charity. The mission of the Blue Ridge Prism is to reduce the impact of invasive species in the northern Blue Ridge Mountains. We cover 10 counties across almost 3 million acres, including the 200,000 acre Shenandoah National Park. We have about roughly 50,000 landowners with 5 acres or more. Let me move this bar out of the way. Okay, sorry about that. We also cover our coverage area includes the counties of Clark, Warren, Rappahannock, Page, Rockingham, Augusta, Madison, Greene, Albemarle, including Charlottesville and Nelson counties. We often work at a broader level to address the threat of invasive species statewide. So now that you know a little bit more about PRISM, I'll give you an overview of the resources we offer to anyone interested in learning more about invasive plants, from the beginner to the conservation practitioner. We have a ton of information and resources to share. And one of my objectives today is to arm you with information and direct you to resources. So here's just to highlight some of the resources on our website, blueridgeprism.org. And we've been working to revamp it a little bit and add some new content to it as well. But if you can scroll through the different menus, and we have invasive management resources may be of particular interest. You can learn how to report invasive plants. We have fact sheets. We have our series of invasive species alerts, various publications that are available to you online for free, new research and supplies. Where can you find supplies to do invasive plant control? And then we also have a contractor list if you're looking for a contractor to help you with invasive plant management or general stewardship of your land. And speaking of our website, I would also like to highlight another resource that we do offer, and I mentioned it is our invasive fact sheets. So we have 14 fact sheets that are focused, that are available for download from our website. And here's an example of one of our fact sheets for garlic mustard. These are chock full of details on a plant's natural history, their identification, control strategies. We also have hard copies of these available upon request at no charge. Blue Ridge Prism offers a number of additional resources, such as presentations like this to interested groups like HOAs, garden clubs, master naturalists, master gardeners, and more. We also host regular meetings featuring invasive species themed presentations from researchers, land managers, and other experts. We also offer a seasonal invasive workshop series where you learn identification, control. And this fall, we were even able to offer some in-person field sessions. So those sessions are done for this fall, but we do plan on having another series in the spring. So stay tuned, and we'll make those announcements with dates and locations in the near future. And you can keep up to date on all of this information, what PRISM is up to and our events and partner events by signing up for our monthly read alerts and newsletters. You can subscribe for news. You can follow us on Facebook, and we're always happy to answer your invasive species questions. Send us an email, info@blueridgeprism.org, or you can ask a question through our website and by clicking Ask a Question on our homepage. Oh, I don't know what happened to my presentation. Hold on. My computer is doing some wackadoo things, so please excuse me. Okay, I think I'm back online. If I'm not, if someone could please send me a chat and let me know if I'm not. So you may know these invasive species. They are famous or infamous. So kudzu is notably the vine that ate the South. And we at PRISM worry about the children, hoping they escape the bus in time. It's kind of our inside joke. You also may have heard about reptiles in the Everglades of Florida. Burmese python and other reptilian invasions in South Florida threaten that ecosystem. The invasive insect spotted lanternfly is now several counties in Virginia. And there are infestations in Frederick, Clark, Warren, Shenandoah, Page, Prince William, and individual insects have been spotted in Albemarle, Madison, and Fauquier counties. But what exactly is an invasive species? So a plant species must jump a few hurdles to become invasive. I am not sure that I'm sharing my screen, so I'm gonna get out of here really quick and make sure that I'm sharing my screen properly. I'm terribly sorry that I'm having a little bit of technical issues here. You think I'd never used Zoom before. Green box, and I was concerned that I wasn't sharing, and I couldn't see the chat window with my screen.
You're great now, Beth.
Okay, thank you. I do apologize, everyone. Thank you for your patience out there. And now my stuff is doing. I'm getting embarrassed now. I'm sorry. Okay. So it's worth noting that there are a lot of words often used to describe invasive species, which are inaccurate and can be confusing. So I'll share some examples. First, non-native invasive is redundant because an invasive species is non-native by its definition. Native invasive, native species that can cause management problems are really nuisance species. They are not considered invasive because they are native. And then we have terms like exotic, alien, foreign. These are often used to describe people in derogatory ways. And then we have the word noxious weed, and that's often a legal definition. In Virginia, there are plants declared noxious weeds that are prohibited from sale. So for this presentation, I'm going to use the term invasive species or invasive plants to describe plants that are non-native to Virginia that cause the harm as described. And I am going to go back and tell you exactly what an invasive species is now. So what exactly is an invasive species? It's a plant species or another species that must jump a few hurdles to become invasive. So first, it has to overcome a geographical barrier like a mountain range or an ocean. Humans are often the ones who move plants long distances deliberately or accidentally. The species must be able to survive in its new location, having the growing conditions it requires. 3, it must form a population that is self-sustaining. 4, it must be able to disperse and spread from where it's established and usually can move pretty fast. And lastly, its negative environmental, economic, or human health effects outweigh any beneficial effects. An invasive species is a species that is non-native to the ecosystem under consideration and whose introduction causes or is likely to cause economic or environmental harm to human health. So invasive species are unimpeded by the things that keep them in check in their native region, like animals, insects, and fungi. These plants have no natural enemies here. As a result, they dominate and outcompete native trees, shrubs, grasses, and other native plants by smothering them, by directly competing for nutrients, water, and sunlight, by altering the soil chemistry, and or by stressing trees by their sheer weight. Invasive species spread aggressively and displace or destroy both native and commercially cultivated plants and animals. After habitat alteration, invasive species are the greatest threat to natural systems, agriculture, and aquaculture. So, invasives take up plants. They harm native plants, and they provide little or no food value to animals, birds, insects, disrupting the locally evolved food web and ecosystem. Most things will not or cannot eat them. And thinking back to last spring to Doug's Talame's talk, native caterpillars cannot feed on them because they did not evolve with these plants. Deer also generally avoid them because they are unpalatable or difficult to eat. Not only are they environmentally harmful, they are expensive. In 2005, it was estimated that invasive species, cost the United States more than $120 billion a year. Annually, invasive species, plants, animals, insects, etc., cost Virginia more than $1 billion. And I am certain that those numbers are even higher, 20, almost 15 years later. So I think that you're going to have to see this again because it's automated. My little talk about the different terms that we use for invasives. All right. So now that that you know more about what makes an invasive plant invasive, I'm going to do a brief identification of a few invasive plants that are present in Virginia with emphasis on their fall characteristics. I'll offer some general control guidance, but I'm not going to go into specific control techniques for each species. And before we dive into that, I just want to take a moment to mention herbicides, yay or nay. Some of you may be concerned about using herbicides. For many species, manual control methods are effective with dedication and persistence. Unfortunately, some invasive plants are very difficult, if not impossible, to control without herbicides. The techniques that you choose will depend on the plant, the density, and the size of the infestation, and your ability. So that's physically, financially, and emotionally. It can be a real investment. So first, you want to consider, will mechanical or manual control techniques be effective? And if not, the objective should always be to use the appropriate amount of herbicide to be effective. More herbicide does not mean more effective. You can also reduce the overall amounts of herbicide that you might use by selecting more targeted treatments, like a cut stump, where you just cut the plant and you apply just a few drops of herbicide on the cut stump. And you can combine herbicide treatments with mechanical or manual techniques. And a reminder to follow and read all label instructions for the herbicide. The label gives information on what precautions to take, what plants to treat, and mixing and application instructions, and most important, environmental information. In addition to the label, find a copy of the herbicide's SDS sheet. That has a lot of additional detailed information. And the other thing is you have to consider if you're comfortable applying herbicides yourself. So these are questions that you have to ask yourself and evaluate what plants you have and if you need to use herbicide. And for more information about invasive plant control, this resource by the Virginia Department of Forestry offers guidance on the best timing for manual control and herbicide applications based on the type of plant. The link to this resource is on Blue Ridge Prism fact sheet webpage. And now we will go on to some invasive plant identification. So let's begin with the invasive vines. Many of the photos you will see for the different plants will depict what the plant will look like in the fall or winter. So I tried to change it up from the spring and show you what in the spring I wanted you to understand what the plants would look like. But now the plants are senescing, and so I wanted you to understand the changes and look for different identification cues. So invasive vines. Our first one is Asiatic Bittersweet. And this is a deciduous twining vine with rounded, finely tubed leaves. Stems can reach up to 4 inches in diameter. These things can get really big. In the photo in the upper right, you can see the size of those vines. It's a lot of weight on the tree. This plant was first introduced in the 1860s as a garden plant. It's tolerant of shade and can be a problem in forests, smothering, and its weight taking down mature trees. The dense thicket shade and smother shrubs in native ground cover. One of the identification characteristics is a reddish root, which is not pictured here. If you do come across them now, the leaves are starting to yellow a bit, as shown in the photo to the left. Another obvious identifying characteristic in the fall and into the winter is the plant's showy fruits. The yellow-green capsule is situated in clusters along the axil. So in other words, the fruit is along the stems where the leaves attach. The capsule split open to reveal fleshy, bright red arils. Bittersweet spreads primarily by seed and is unfortunately moved around by the birds. And you can see a up-close photo of the fruit in the lower right photo, and you can see the capsules that have split to reveal that. And that's what the plants look like right now. I actually saw quite a few of them out in the field last week, and they are full of fruit, unfortunately. So the general strategy of controlling vines is to control the climbing vines first. We'll see some additional vines later in the presentation, but some other vines that you may encounter, like porcelain berry or Japanese honeysuckle, all of these are climbing vines. The photo illustrates cutting the climbing vine, and in this particular case, they chose to apply herbicide to the fresh cut. Generally, you have to be patient, and sometimes it can take the vine a bit to die, like the part of the vine from the cut up, because they have a lot of stored energy in those tissues. It can take weeks, like for English ivy, it can take a month or more. Then once you've cut all of those climbing vines, you can concentrate your work on the vines on the ground through different techniques, foliar herbicide, you can mow, you can handful small vines, you can use goats. And a note about goats, they generally alone will not control invasive vines. They're fun, they're interesting, they're a real conversation piece, but they are only most effective with repeated grazing periods followed up by herbicide treatments when the goats have done the bulk of the removal work. If you're interested in using goats for invasive control, work with an experienced goat herder who best understands how to deploy the goats for vegetation management. Goats can be quickly moved from focusing on invasive shrubs and vines to the native plants that you want to preserve. So you want to work with someone who really understands their animals and how to properly use them. So now we're going to move on to invasive shrubs. The shrub in this picture might be one that you all recognize or enjoy the fruit. This is wineberry. It's more common in the mountains and the northern Piedmont. It is often sold and planted as an edible. This is a fairly easy to identify in the fall and winter by the distinctive red stem. And you can see in this photo, especially the stem is armed with a reddish gland-tipped hairs and slender straight prickles. The prickle is a sharp outgrowth of the epidermis or bark. And according to the Flora of Virginia, the shade-tolerant Asian raspberry is one of the worst invasive shrubs in the rich mesic forests of our mountains in northern Piedmont. This is another one that you may know as well, Autumnall. Autumnall was widely planted at one time, being promoted as a shrub for wildlife and for mine reclamation. The shrub leaves out earlier than most natives, and its leaves have a characteristic silvery hue. And you can see that silvery hue under the leaf in the lower right photo. Red fruits dotted with tiny silvery speckles are present August through November. So they're on the plants right now. They're loaded with fruit. Autumnall is totally deciduous, meaning it holds its leaves and they fall gradually during the winter. The branches and main stems are glossy and gray-green with scattered thorns and have many whitish dots or lenticels. And you can see in the left photo, autumn olive in the dormant season, kind of some of the characteristic branching of that particular shrub and that the color of the bark there. I don't think that you can see the lenticels very well in that particular photo, but you can definitely see it on the fruit, the silvery, the tiny silvery speckles. And our next invasive shrub is the Asian bush honeysuckles. There are several species that are invasive bush honeysuckles, including Amur honeysuckle, Morrow's honeysuckle, Tartarian honeysuckle, and winter honeysuckle. They can be difficult to tell apart, but the most common ones that you might see in Virginia are Amur honeysuckle and Morrow's honeysuckle. All of the invasive bush honeysuckles have similar characteristics. They have opposite leaves. They have hollow pith in their stems. And you can see in the lower right-hand photo an example of that. Right now, they'll have red or orange berries in the fall. I actually saw I think it was a blue jay or a mockingbird, I can't remember, but they were in a shrub next to my house and it was eating the berries and I was trying to tell it, no, don't do that, but it did. It didn't understand English apparently. So these invasive bush honeysuckles are also tardily deciduous. Early spring leaf out 2 to 3 weeks ahead of natives and rapid growth give this invasive shrub an edge, filling in forest understories, reducing the plant diversity of the forest. It also alters soil chemistry, giving itself the upper hand. Birds nesting in Amur honeysuckle are less successful in fledging their young, and the shrub also alters habitats for amphibian species. The characteristic flowers emerge during May and June, and the berries are dark red. So how do we control some of these invasive shrubs? I have a picture here where someone is using a shovel or a weed wrench. So you can hand pull the seedlings and use a weed wrench on larger shrubs. A combination of manual removal and herbicide may be required. Autumnall is one of those shrubs that is very difficult to control without herbicide. You'll have a lot of resprouting. You can do foliar applications. I mentioned the combination of techniques. And again, goats love multiflora rose, which I didn't discuss in this presentation. And they love a lot of the other invasive shrubs as well. All right, and next I'll cover a couple of invasive trees with you, and we'll identify what they look like in the fall. So this next one is called Royal Paulownia, or also called Princess Tree. It's an invasive tree that's been planted as an ornamental yard tree and in tree plantations for export to Japan, where the wood is prized. It is able to take hold after disturbance in a forest fire or timber harvest. So it really likes disturbance. Paulownia can produce seed pods that darken and dry, which can be an identifying characteristic during the fall and winter. You can see photos of the seed pods here, and also an up-close photo of the tree's bark. One tree can produce 21 million tiny seeds per year, and they can move them pretty far too. They're very tiny seeds. So I like to call Atlantis Paulownia's sister tree. Often I have seen them growing together. They seem to like very similar sites. Atlantis, or tree of heaven, produces seeds that are light, thin, and highly mobile, spreading at least a mile from the tree via wind. A female tree tends to hang on to the seeds into the fall and early winter. So that's an identifying characteristic for this time of year. Atlantis has smooth bark that resembles the skin of a cantaloupe, another identifying characteristic during the winter. So unfortunately, for best control of this particular species, an herbicide is required. If you cut Atlantis and do not use an herbicide, you will stimulate root sprouts and have 100 Atlantis instead of just one stem. Another definitive characteristic of Atlantis is its unique and piercing smell, often described as rancid or burnt peanut butter. To me, it just stinks. I can't even find a word to describe it. I do not smell the peanut butter odor. So even during the dormant season, a broken twig or limb will have that distinctive odor. So a couple of things about controlling invasive trees. The biggest thing here is safety considerations. After you control a tree, will the tree skeleton be in a high traffic area or will it be in the middle of the woods? So if it's in an area where there's a lot of people next to a house, you will have to remove the whole tree for safety reasons. If it's out in the middle of the woods, you can do some control and just leave it stand, and the woodpeckers will take care of it later. So different control strategies. You can hand pull seedlings. You can mow and cut and grub. Again, with Atlantis, you need to use herbicide if you're going to cut it. Herbicide applications. This particular photo shows a technique called hack and squirt, where they have used a hatchet to make a series of cuts around the tree and then put a little squirt of a high concentrated herbicide into each cut. Now is a great time of year to control a lot of the plants that I just described. The vines, shrubs, and trees in particular are highly susceptible to control. And it's a lot cooler, there are fewer ticks, so it's a great time to be out in the woods and looking at things. So now that you've learned about several species of invasive plants that are common in most areas of Virginia, you may even have a few of them on your own property. And you might be thinking, this seems like a big problem, what can I do? It may seem overwhelming, so let's break it down. First, learn to identify invasive plants and learn how to control them to the best of your ability on your property. You're doing that just by attending this presentation. So that's a great start because there are a lot of invasive plants. Second, you can report occurrences of invasive species that have escaped from cultivation. Report invasive plants using EDMAPs. And I'll take just a minute to introduce you to EDMAPs. PRISM, we just hosted our fall quarterly meeting last week and had a session on EDMAPs with Rebecca Wallace from Bugwood. She was fantastic. And I encourage you to go to PRISM's YouTube page and check out that fall meeting and Rebecca's presentation on how to use EDMAPs. So citizen scientists, citizen conservationists like you are the eyes on the ground to help detect new invasive species and track how invasive species spread across Virginia over time. This kind of information helps biologists. We can use your help. Many Virginia master naturalists are already contributing, and I just wanted to give them a shout out and a big thanks to each of them for work on this project. If you want to learn more about how to use EDMAPs and how to help report invasive species in Virginia, you can visit PRISM's website and look for the report invasive plants for more information. So what can I do? I said there were 3 things, and there are. The third is to choose native plants for your landscape. And we're going to take a look at some commonly planted invasive plants that you should avoid and some native alternatives. But first, I just want to mention that we have got to stop these invasive plants at the source. Who is the source? It is us. It is the consumer. And as many of you know, these invasive plants are readily available at Home Depot and other box stores like Lowe's, Walmart. They're available at Amazon. They're available at other online outlets. They're available at Etsy, eBay. They're available at your local nursery and garden centers. So there are many invasive plants that are being grown in Virginia, that are for sale in Virginia, and that are widely used for landscaping in Virginia. The invasive plants you are working hard to control could very well be the same species of plants your neighbor will be planting this weekend. Half the solution for reducing the threat of invasive species is reducing their demand. So let your local nursery know if you see an invasive plant on their shelves. Of course, do that in a kind, non-confrontational, and educational way. Make sure you tell your local garden retailer that you want Virginia native plants. Their customer is you, And your feedback is very important. And I'd like to take a moment here to touch on House Resolution 527. So this year, House Resolution HJ 527 created an invasive plant work group to make recommendations to the legislature on strategies to reduce the sale of invasive plants in Virginia. Blue Ridge Prism is pleased to have a seat at the table for this important group. The work group will be wrapping up in the next few months, and they need to hear from you. Your voice is very powerful. So I'm asking you to consider to attend a work group meeting in person and make a public comment there, or email the work group organizers. Tell the work group that it is time to get invasive plants out of Virginia. So follow Blue Ridge Prism on Facebook or check for updates on the Virginia Regulatory Town Hall on the work group and when they meet. And if you want to learn more about that, you can send me an email, info@blueridgeprism.org, and I'm happy to share some additional thoughts and resources with you about that group. So now we're going to review several of those plants that you'll see at these box stores or your local garden center and consider native alternatives best suited for landscaping purposes. The suggested native alternatives should be appropriate for most parts of Virginia across the mountain, Piedmont, and coastal regions. So first, the following vines are often selected for ground covers because they are perennial, hardy, and evergreen. When they escape, they form dense mats on forest floor, displacing native plants. Here we have English ivy, which quickly climbs trees, and the weight of the vine can pull a tree down and make the tree vulnerable to damage during snow and ice events from the excess weight, as shown in the lower right photo. Those are actually trees at a local park here in Charlottesville that are completely covered in English ivy. So it adds a lot of extra weight to the tree and makes it vulnerable. So English ivy becomes reproductive when it goes vertical and it's able to get some more sunlight. And if you'll notice in the left photo that there is a noticeable change in the shape of the leaf. That's the mature leaf. At that time, it will flower and produces berries that are again consumed by birds. The berries will ripen, turning dark blue to black in the late winter. And the photo showing the berries was actually taken in February here in Charlottesville. So that's to give you an idea of how the timeline of how the berries ripen. So English ivy, don't plant English ivy. And then I think of this as being its sister invasive plant. This is winter creeper. It's also an evergreen. It also climbs trees, and it also smothers native plants and trees. And also the birds disperse the seeds widely. And in here, you can see in the lower right photo, a photo of the fruit, a close-up of the fruit and the capsules that have split to reveal the flesh-covered seeds. And those seeds are on the plants right now. So think about replacing your English ivy or winter creeper, or if you're thinking about, hey, I want to put some ground cover in these areas, there's a lot of great native plants that are good, good alternatives to these invasive plants. Many of them are spring ephemerals, and we all need that little pop of color in the spring to make us happy. So I'll just kind of go through a few of these quickly. These are some of the same plants that I highlighted during my spring presentation. So first we have moss phlox, and that is the photo here on the slide. It is a stunning, stunning flower. That's like one of my personal favorite photos that I've ever taken in my whole life. It's a lovely flower, and the plant can cascade over rock ledges and beds, and it adds a lot of texture to the garden, and that nice bit of color in the fall. Oh, excuse me, in the spring. We also have a lot of native sedges that are really good for ground cover. So those are carrot species. There's partridge berry, wild geranium that has spring purple flowers, foam flower, and then pussy toes are another one of my favorites. And they like dry soils and they can tolerate shade to full sun. So some more native alternatives for ground covers, ferns. So ferns are like I think the unsung heroes of the garden, the native garden, and they're really underused. So some suggested ferns for ground cover, sensitive fern is a good one. And then there's also Christmas fern, which is an evergreen. So if you're looking for a little bit more color in the winter, a Christmas fern is a good choice. We also have wild ginger. I still have wild ginger that it's starting to look a little beat up at the end of the season, but it was a real champion all summer and held its color and looked quite beautiful. We also have golden ragwort, Virginia creeper, a perennial vine. And our speaker last week, Kim, she just made my heart sing because she mentioned a few of the plants that are underappreciated in the garden. And Virginia creeper is one of those plants, I think. And I really like to encourage it on my trellises and around the garden. And I even had the delightful find this summer that some of it was flowering and I could actually examine the flowers, and there's some fruit on it now that I'm hoping a bird will pick off. So it's a really delightful plant. And so I was thrilled that Kim brought it up. And then there's the common blue violet, which is easy to grow and transplant it. Often it is treated like a weed, but it's a wonderful ground cover when used in the right places. I like to tuck them into nooks and crannies for early spring bright blue flowers, and they're so easy to transplant. You really can just move them around, and they're just tough as nails. So shifting gears back to our moving to invasive shrubs. I wanted to highlight a very popular invasive shrub called burning bush, winged burning bush. It is prized for its brilliant fall red color, and it's planted everywhere. It's shade tolerant, invading forest understories and forming dense thickets which outcompete and displace native plant species. It also threatens coastal scrublands and prairies. So the burning bush is beginning to turn red now, and it will be very easy to pick out of the landscape. The reddest capsules of the burning bush will split to reveal a orange-red flesh-covered seed in the fall. Birds disperse them. You can also look for the winged twigs to help with winter identification. And there's a close-up of that winged twig in the lower right corner of the slide. And you can see the bright red. This is a really good time to take a walk in. If you have some forest land or a little wood lot, it's a good time to be out to take a walk, to look for some of these invasive shrubs and vines. They're really a lot easier to identify. And as you move into winter, you can see some of these evergreen things too, like English ivy and winter creeper, privet, things that like to stay green all winter. They're easy to spot. And so, yeah, it's a good time. So we have some shrubs that offer wonderful fall color. We have arrowwood viburnum, maple leaf viburnum, common ninebark. This has dull yellow to bronze fall leaves, bright to reddish brown fruit. It tolerates moist to dry soil. Red chokeberry, which is pictured here, it is a salmon to scarlet purple fall leaves. It has a white flower, red fruit, It likes sun to park shade, moist to dry soils. It's a great plant for wildlife. And then we also have winged sumac, which I got to see a couple of weekends ago, a beautiful patch in Western Virginia at Natural Tunnel State Park. And it was a stunning shrub along the roadside. It had a bright red fall color, showy fruiting clusters that turn maroon brown. And that reminds me that I should update this slide with a picture of that shrub. It is worth sharing in the future. And many of these shrubs that I mentioned, the native alternatives, they are very good for migrating birds. Birds need really specific nutritional requirements right now. They need a lot of fat, they need fuel for migration. And a lot of these shrubs are really good for the birds and will help them with their migration. So another popular invasive landscaping shrub is Japanese barberry. This shrub has spoon-shaped leaves and sharp spines that can pierce a glove. It can pierce a leather glove. When cut, the wood is bright yellow, so that can be an identifying characteristic. It grows well in full sun to shade and can form dense stands in forests, open woodlands, wetlands, and fields. It displaces many native plants, and its leaf litter can alter soil chemistry, making the soil more basic. Like many of these invasive shrubs and vines, Japanese barberry is totally deciduous, and it holds its leaves well into the winter and sports bright red fruit in the fall and winter. So most concerning about Japanese barberry is that it creates favorable environment for black-legged ticks, also known as deer ticks, which are the vector for Lyme disease. Research has linked black-legged ticks and Japanese barberry. Managing barberry in wooded areas showed a significant decline in tick abundance for up to 5 years. And in here you can see a photo of the bright red fruit in the upper right photo, and then the color of the leaves in the fall. So what are some good native alternatives? Japanese barberry offers that red fall color and bright red fruit for fall and winter interest. It is a pretty hardy shrub. So here's some well-suited native alternatives. We have shrubby St. John's wort. This has a yellow flower. It's hardy and does well in the garden, forming a dense round form. Deerberry, very hardy. We have maple leaf viburnum. It has rose pink fall leaves, and it also has white flowers in the summer. Waxy black fruit now, and tolerates sun to part sun to shade. And then there's New Jersey tea, one of my favorites. It's adaptable and tolerates really poor soils. The height is about 2 to 3 feet, and it has a nice mounding form with a white flower in the early summer that drives the pollinators crazy. They love it. It's a beautiful, great shrub for the landscape. Another invasive shrub, and we all know this sad, woefully overused plant, from commercial offices and fast food restaurants to well-manicured yards in Virginia. Heavenly bamboo, or nandina, is not bamboo at all, but related to its invasive cousins like Japanese barberry and leatherleaf mahonia. Nandina has evergreen leaves and bright red berries, making it easy to spot in the fall and winter. Homeowners often plant them thinking they are helping birds, but they are not. Nandina berries are toxic and have amounts of cyanide that have been documented to kill birds that have eaten them. The birds typically avoid them, but will eat them in desperation when food is in short supply. So if we're looking for alternatives to nandina that feature nice red berries, a good one is winterberry. It is deciduous with bright red berries. It likes sun to part shade, wet to moist soils. And I really, I love this photo in the slide, and I just wanted to give a shout out to Betty Truax for sharing this photo with me. I just love that the robin is feasting on the winterberry berries, as it should. So, and I like that you can see its little tongue in the photo too. It's a detail of the bird that you normally don't get to see. So thanks, Betty. I appreciate you sharing your photo. She's a wonderful photographer and has a wonderful garden. The next shrub that I like personally is spice bush. It has bright red berries. I think that my spice bush has been completely picked clean by now, but I did manage to get a few of the berries before the birds got them, so I could propagate them this coming year. And it's a bonus plant because it's a host plant for the spice bush swallowtail. This shrub like shades the sun, wet to no soil, and the deer tend to avoid it. I don't think it tastes good to them. Another one is fragrant sumac. This one really likes dry soil and sun. And then lastly, we have inkberry, which is probably more in the coastal region. And that is an evergreen. So that's a great one if you're in the coastal region. Now I want to touch on some invasive grasses. The first one that we'll talk about is miscanthus, or Chinese silvergrass. More than 50 ornamental forms of this plant are sold in the US horticultural trade. This invasive grass escapes forming extensive infestations along roadsides, forest edges, right-of-ways, and other disturbed sites. This can be a real threat to grassland natural communities in Virginia. The other invasive grass I wanted to highlight is called fountain grass. It is beginning to escape cultivation. This one is especially becoming problematic as it invades pasture land, reducing suitable forage of livestock. Cows will not eat it. It is difficult to control and has serious economic consequences for farmers managing their herds and livestock. And I just got a report earlier this week from someone who identified this in their pasture, and I had to unfortunately tell them that it was fountain grass. So they've got a bit of a road ahead of them trying to figure out how to manage this particular grass. So if you have fountain grass in your landscape, please do your neighbors a favor and do your farmer neighbors a favor and remove it and plant something else. Right now, this grass is easy to spot because of its inflorescence. It has a dark purple cylindrical plume. And I actually just saw a patch of it here in Charlottesville near Ivy Creek Natural Area along the road there near the entrance. So it is definitely on the move, and it's moving fast. So what are some good alternatives to fountain grass? So we have purple lovegrass that grows low to the ground. It flowers in the late summer, and it features these purplish clouds, as you can see in the photo. It likes sun and moist to dry soil. Muley grass is a clumping grass with a rounded form, airy plumes, and it likes sun and dry soil. Muley grass is best suited for the mountain and Piedmont regions in Virginia. Miscanthus is often planted because of its strong vertical form and fall and winter interest, turning a straw color with fluffy seed heads. These following native grasses offer that strong vertical form and winter interest. So we have little blue stem. It turns bronze orange in the fall. It's tolerant to heat, drought, and poor soils. The drier, the hotter, the poorer the soil, the better. Little blue stem loves it. Indian grass. This is a taller clumping grass with tall tufted foliage, golden plumes. It likes sun and dry soil. There's also giant plume grass, which is more suited for the Piedmont and Coastal Plain regions. It's a large, tall grass with autumn plumes. And then another one that I don't have on this list is switchgrass. That gives the strong vertical interest and height. And I believe there are many cultivars of switchgrass if you're looking for something a little bit shorter that are suitable as well. Another grass I'd like to mention is bamboo, and Bamboo is a grass and it's often planted for screening on a property. It tends to invade areas close to where it was intentionally planted. It rarely produces seeds, but spreads aggressively through its rhizomes. Once established, this plant can take quite a bit of effort to bring under control. One plant will turn into an acre before you know it and can be a real pain for neighbor relations. So what are some alternatives for bamboo? Well, bamboo is often planted for screening. So achieve a screening, consider layers of plants to create that screen. Native evergreen trees combined with shrubs are your best options to create a natural and wildlife friendly screen. And I really like the photo in the slide from the natural garden. And I think I lifted this either from their website or from the Native Plant Society website. But I like how they featured Eastern red cedar. It's a wonderful early successional species. It thrives in full sun. It tolerates poor soil and drought conditions. The tree can get rather large. There are cultivars that have shortened the Eastern red cedar available if you can't have a large tree. And I noticed a couple of weeks ago when I was traveling on I-81, it was lined with cedar trees, and they were loaded with fruit. I mean, they just had this blue hue to them. They were absolutely loaded with the little juniper berries, and they were really a stunning sight as we were driving by. So another evergreen tree is American holly. You'll need male and female trees for berry production. It's a nice pyramid-shaped evergreen. Some deciduous shrubs that may work well with your evergreen trees, common vine bark, which are most appropriate in the mountain and Piedmont regions. We have black paw. It's a wide range of forested to open, and it tolerates wet to dry habitats. So that's a good all-around shrub. Maple leaf viburnum that I've mentioned a few times, part shade to shade, and then American wild plum. That one can get a little wild, but it could be a suitable screening plant. So now I want to talk about a few invasive trees, actually one invasive tree, and you may know this species as Bradford pear. This invasive tree species flowers during late March and early April, and it's super easy to identify when it is in flower, as it's one of the first flowering trees of the spring. And by the way, it smells terrible. So it's widely planted as a street and yard tree. It readily escapes cultivation and overtakes fields, popping up in forests and fields, often spread by birds. So the calorie pear has a strong conical shape, as you can see in the photo of the dormant tree. You can see that shape of the mature tree. And currently it will have small fruits that you can see in the lower right photo. They look like little tiny round pears. They are eaten by birds. This escaped trees often have thorns up to 3 inches in length. That's another identifying characteristic in the winter. So what are some native alternatives? So the trees that I have listed below they're all shorter trees with early spring flowers. We have downy serviceberry. It's 20 to 30 feet in height. It tolerates part shade to full sun, moist to dry soil. We also have Eastern redbud. It has pink flowers, but that's okay. I'll take pink or white in the spring. I just need some flowers, like many of you probably do too. Eastern redbud, 15 to 40 feet in height. It's part shade to full sun, moist to dry soil. And right now the Eastern redbud has its little seed pods. It's a legume. And I know I see a lot of birds that will feast on those seeds. Little chickadees really like to eat them. So they're great for wildlife and birds in the fall and winter too. And then we also have flowering dogwood, another one of my personal favorites, and is featured in the photo in the slide. it gets to about 12 to 20 feet. And in my mind, this is a workhorse of a tree because it offers early spring showy flowers that are both highly pleasing to humans and bees alike. The bright red fruit that it has right now offers hungry birds fuel for migration. This tree tolerates part shade to sun and moist to dry soils. So, unfortunately, there are so many invasive plants that we did not cover this evening, and many of them have been deliberately planted into our landscapes. Changes in the state law, in addition to changes in consumer plant choices, will be what turns the ship of invasive plant invasions in Virginia. Addressing the impacts of invasive plants is an essential part of stewarding your land, no matter how small it might be. It is an ongoing part of land management that is a long-term investment. So start small, think big, talk to your neighbors, and remember that nature is all around us and is up to us to plant the things that birds, native bees, butterflies, caterpillars, and us humans too need. So remove your invasive plants and choose native plants when thinking about your landscaping. You absolutely can and will make a difference, and you got this. And lastly, I wanted to share a slide with some additional resources with their web links. So I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I also wanted to mention that I noticed in the while everyone was logging on, there were several of you that specifically mentioned that you've been removing invasive species and replacing them with natives. So that great job. That's awesome news. And it really warmed my heart to see all of the work that people are doing on the ground. So with that, I will be happy to take your questions. Thank you.
So Joanne will ask our first question of many here. Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. And thank you, Beth, for that wonderful presentation. We have many questions and comments that have come up.
Okay.
And so we'll do our best to address them in the roughly half hour that we have. And I would like to begin with one which addresses the question of different lists that guide people's understanding of what is invasive. The comment says that this person typically follows the Virginia DCR Department of Conservation and Recreation invasive plant species list, but Nandina, which was mentioned, isn't on that list. And so he's allowed those to be planted on his property. So could you address the different lists that are out there?
That's a great question. So during my presentation, I mentioned that there are noxious weeds. And so there's a noxious weed list, and those are weeds that have been determined to be noxious in Virginia, and they are illegal to buy here in Virginia, and they are in the Virginia code. So those are noxious weeds, and there's a group of them. I can't remember all of them. The DCR list that we mentioned has 90 plants on it, and that list is several years old now, and it needs to be updated because there are some invasive plants that probably should be added to that list. The DCR 90 list is an educational tool, and it is invasive plants that are observed in natural areas. And I can tell you that each plant went through a vigorous process, an assessment process, using an assessment tool that was developed, I think, partially by the Nature Conservancy and Nature Conserve, and Kevin Heffernan at DCR can tell you more about that particular tool and the process, but it goes through a process where you have to answer a lot of different questions and assess the plant, and then it ranks the plant. So that DCR list is an educational tool. It is not a regulatory tool. It needs some updating, and I would agree that Nandina should be on that list amongst some other invasive plants.
Lovely, thank you.
Yeah.
And you have provided wonderful alternatives to many of the invasive plants we've been fighting in our backyards. There is a desire to be able to access that list, or perhaps if Blue Ridge Prism doesn't have your list of native alternatives on it, we did a quick search and didn't find it, maybe you can suggest some places to go.
Well, I can share that list with everyone, all of our registrants for the program. I'm happy to share that list, and so Louis Ginter will send that out with a follow-up email. There are a lot of other resources out there. So the landscaping with virginianatives.org website has a lot of great resources. Plant Nova Natives has a lot of great resources about using native plants. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I just learned about a new resource that I think it's called Keeping It Natural, that I need to learn more about, but it has a lot of great recommendations for what to plant after you've taken out native plants or thinking about native landscaping.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Now, many of our other questions have to do with very specific plants and
Sure.
how to manage them.
Okay.
So we'll start at the top and see how far we can get.
Okay, I'll do my best.
Thank you. And of course, Beth will be available by email, as she said. So we'll make sure that your email is distributed to all attendees as well. So I have an English ivy invasion on my property. Are there native species that could outcompete it? And how should I manage this?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I don't know of many things that can outcompete English ivy. So I'm fighting a similar battle on my own tiny lot here in Charlottesville, and we have some almost vertical cuts. They scooped out a big part of the hill to build our house back in the 60s, and of course those steep slopes are covered in English ivy, amongst other things. So I have a really tricky situation where I can't rip out the English ivy because it really is the only thing holding back the hill, even though English ivy is not the best plant for erosion control. So I have been trying to scatter native seeds, and one of them is river oats grass, Chasmanthium latifolium. It seems to be able to grow with the English ivy. It can be a pretty aggressive native grass in the garden, but for my purpose, it seems to be working. Is it going to fully outcompete the English ivy? I don't know, but it's like I'm looking at it from a perspective that it is going to be a longer term replacement, where I'm trying to add natives. Another one that I'm adding to that slope is Virginia creeper, transplanting plants, trying to propagate some new plants and adding to that slope. And I also have been using the native honeysuckle, Lonicera sempervirens, I think that's how you say it. And that one is so-so. So it's a pretty tough one to try to get natives to outcompete it. So you're going to have to rip it out a little bit at a time, and then plant some natives and just keep at it. Did I answer that question fully, or did I miss part of it?
I see there's some clarification about ground ivy actually being
Oh, ground.
at issue. I misspoke.
Oh,
Ground
yeah,
ivy.
that's a different plant.
It is.
So that one, it can be tough too, because when you pull it, it likes to leave little bits and pieces that can regenerate. That one might be easier to introduce some natives to outcompete it. But again, it's going to be a combination of control and adding plants to other than like ground cover like plants to outcompete it. You could try like wild ginger, some of the native grasses like chasmanthium that I mentioned that can be really aggressive in the garden. I had one more at the tip of my tongue and I lost it. So that's what I have.
Another question that did came up is appropriate when you speak of chasmanthium, which can be very aggressive, as you say. And this person would like to know where to find out more, or how to find out more about the aggressive nature of some native species. And one person speaks in particular about Virginia creeper and how to control that when it becomes too rampant.
I just take some hand nippers to my Virginia creeper when it's misbehaving, going in places I don't want to go. It's just part of my garden maintenance. I don't actively try to control it or kill it. To me, it's a valuable native plant that I want in my garden, and I feel like I have the capacity to control it easily with manual techniques. In a forested situation, I've not observed Virginia creeper misbehaving at all. It seems to play nicely with native trees. You have an individual small stem that climbs the side of the native trees, and then it's also deciduous, so it's not adding a lot of weight in the winter, as some of our evergreen invasives do, like English ivy. So I don't have a lot of reason to control Virginia creeper, and it's a valuable wildlife plant as well for in the fall. So good question.
Thank you very much. All right, let's look at a couple of other aggressive vines. Kudzu being
Kudzu.
first and foremost, perhaps in some parts of our state as an issue.
Mm-hmm. Is there a specific question about kudzu?
Yes, the specific question was how to contain it.
How to contain it. Yeah, unfortunately, if you have a very small infestation, you can grub it out. You can get that crown, you can dig down and pull out the crown and basically dig the plant out of the ground. But typically, you're not going to have a very small infestation. So the best way to approach kudzu is, as I mentioned in the controlling invasive vines, to first go after those aerial vines. So you'll want to cut them and apply. If you're an herbicide user, with kudzu, you want to use herbicide. It's one of those that you're not going to control. You're not going to have a lot of success unless you use herbicide. You'll cut that aerial vine, apply a little herbicide to the cut surface of the vine, and then you will start following up with control on the ground. Depending on the size of your infestation, you may consider professional help and looking for a consultant or someone that has the equipment to be able to control a large infestation of kudzu. You might need a larger sprayer than like a little backpack sprayer, a 1 gallon garden sprayer to control it. And there's a variety of herbicides that you can use. Broadly specific herbicides are going to be your best bet. And I'll refer everyone back to the Virginia Department of Forestry document that I showed earlier in this session. But there are a variety of herbicides that you can use to control, and it can take many years of follow-up treatment.
Yes, and I found the actual question, and it actually was about what citizens could do about kudzu taking over roadsides along our highways, which might suggest joining a group that is dedicating themselves to invasive removals. I know there's a local park stewards group in Arlington that is working on kudzu that's growing along the Potomac River.
Yeah.
Maybe you have other thoughts on that.
So, you know, if it is growing along a state road or highway, that's going to be under VDOT, their purview to control it. So it may be worth a call to your local VDOT office to talk to them about if they're aware of this, and ask them if they're planning to control it. You know, and then sometimes it spills over into private land. So then you have to get permission of the private landowner to control. So there's a lot of coordination if it's not your land or if it's along the side of the road. It's not that. I mean, the kudzu can be controlled, and eventually you will have successful control of it, but it's going to require a coordinated and longer term effort. And somebody has to step up to the plate to do that. So, and it's, you know, often it's really difficult for small not-for-profits like Blue Ridge Prison to take on those projects, because there's so many projects, and we just don't have the capacity to do that. So, you know, if someone writes to us and tells us, I try to empower them to make that call, to be, you know, if they're really interested in it, then maybe they can be the person that can follow through and figure out how to help get it done. With Prism's help, we're always there to help people, but taking the lead is sometimes difficult for that.
And just to clarify, PRISM does address species that occur outside of the Piedmont in Virginia.
We do. So PRISM covers 10 counties in the northern Blue Ridge Mountains and some of the Piedmont. But yeah, we do a lot of statewide. You know, we address invasives at a statewide level. The fact sheets that we have on our website and the plants that we discuss in our invasive workshops are plants that you're going to find in that 10 county region.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Well, we've talked about kudzu along our roads. A couple of species that are traveling along our waterways have been asked about.
Yeah.
And two of them would be, if you can address them, Japanese knotweed and lesser celandine.
Oh,
so
okay.
could you?
Like control?
Can you address Japanese knotweed?
Okay, well, I'll start with Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed is it is a perennial. It doesn't often spread by seed, but it does spread vigorously through the rhizomes, and bits of rhizomes can often be displaced or broken off and then moved around through water during flooding events. And so often, you know, a large infestation upstream is going to cause smaller infestations downstream. It can be a tough one to deal with. And that particular species, using an herbicide control is unfortunately the best approach. I don't know the success of like digging it out or using like black plastic to smother it. I think that might be another control technique, but it might be difficult in certain circumstances. So the best thing to do is to allow the Japanese knotweed to grow, and then you want to cut it back during the growing season, and then allow it to regrow several feet. And then you will use a foliar application of herbicide to begin to control it. And it's going to require several applications to exhaust that rhizome system. You know, that's the best way, and it reduces the amount of herbicide that you're going to use. So, and knotweed can be pretty tall, and when you're applying herbicide, you don't want to be spraying over your head. So by cutting it, you achieve two things. One, you're not spraying herbicide over your head, and you're reducing the overall amount of herbicide that you'll be using. And then also by cutting it, you immediately weakened the rhizome system, and you let it regrow. So the plant is starting to get under stress, and it makes it more susceptible to the herbicide.
Good, thank you. And would you have anything you'd like to add about lesser celandine, Beth?
Wow, this is for me personally, this is a new invasive species, and I don't have a lot of experience controlling it. Blue Ridge Prism does have a fact sheet on lesser celandine on our website, and it does have some control recommendations. And I believe, so the best time to control it is going to be in the very early spring, when it starts to be green, but before all of the spring ephemerals are coming out, the native spring ephemerals. And so timing is key. And I believe the herbicide would probably be glyphosate. But again, check our fact sheet at the Ridge Prism's website for more information on that plant.
Thank you. Thank you very much. What recommendation would you have for someone who has already cut their Atlantis altissima tree
Yeah.
and is dealing now with the hundreds of root sprouts?
Oh, no. Well,
12,
it happens.
12 trees were just removed. Do I use glyphosate to kill off all the shoots coming up around the roots?
Yes, you can. And another herbicide that you can use is called triclopyr. That is a more targeted herbicide. It's broadly specific. So you can do a foliar application to the leaves. You can also, tediously cut all of those little sprouts and apply a dab of herbicide to the cut. If you don't want to do a foliar application. Unfortunately, you cannot hand pull them because these are all root sprouts. So you're just going to break them off and they're going to resprout. If this person just had these trees removed, that stump is still alive. And so they can go back, and depending on how much stump is left above the ground, you can go ahead and do like that hack and squirt, like I showed in the picture when dealing with invasive trees. You could also do a little technique called drill and fill, where you actually take a drill, you drill some holes into the stump, and you pour concentrated herbicide in each one. So the idea is you want to kill all those little resprouts, and you want to kill that stump that's still alive, so it stops throwing out little resprouts. So it's not too late if those stumps are still alive, but if it's been long enough that they've started to decay and they're rotten, then those techniques won't be effective. Then you'll just have to keep spraying the resprouts. Good question.
Thank you. Thank you. Someone is interested in knowing your thoughts about Buddleia, butterfly bush, which she acknowledges is not native, but is it invasive? I don't see it popping up all over.
Yes, it can be invasive, and there are reports of it popping up in natural areas. So Buddleia is widely planted. It's called butterfly bush because butterflies love all of those flowers. I would encourage everyone to ditch that butterfly bush and plant butterfly milkweed instead for the butterflies. And oh, by the way, it's a host plant for the monarch caterpillar too. So Buddleia can be invasive. And a personal observation, when I was traveling a couple of years ago, we were on a train in England from outside of London, and there was Buddleia that just that
Yes.
just line the railways. It was
That's right.
amazing. It was so highly invasive there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope this isn't what it's going to do here when it really starts to escape.
I had
Yeah.
that same experience
Yeah.
and thought. Yeah. All right. And what about privet? Are
Privet.
there? Yeah.
Privet is also invasive. There are several species of ligustrum that are invasive in Virginia. A very common one is called Chinese privet, and the scientific name escapes me at the moment, but that's going to be one of the most common ones that you will see. It's an evergreen. It tends to be an evergreen shrub in Virginia. Very invasive, often planted as a hedge. I have a hedge of it between my house and my neighbor's house that drives me insane. And I see seedlings. We've pretty much been able to prevent it from flowering with timed trimmings, so it doesn't get to flower. But this year it did flower, and yeah, I'm sure I'll be seeing seedlings popping up everywhere.
Yeah, I think it was the cheap and cheerful plant of choice of our parents and grandparents generation.
Yeah, and often, people, we just didn't know. We didn't know many of these plants were going to turn out to be bad, negative for our environment, and that they would become invasive. And many of them were promoted by government agencies for wildlife and cover and erosion control. Multiflora rose and autumn olive. So, and a lot of our landscaping plants, we just didn't know. Now we know, and we need to do something about them.
Yeah, indeed. Well, we have about 3 more minutes. So
Okay.
Let's see if we can find a couple more questions, one of which is a little more general. So we'll address that. Now being the time to cut down and treat invasive shrubs and vines and trees, what to do with all those berries? Anything special?
Yeah, that's a tricky spot. If you can pile and burn them safely, that is the strategy. If you can collect the berries and dispose of them, that's a strategy. The reality is that there's always going to be follow-up. There's going to be seed in the seed bank, and you'll have to continue to control and look for new seedlings, re-sprouts. So, why you want to minimize, like if you have an autumnall shrub that's loaded with berries, you don't want to drag it across your field, of course, and spread berries everywhere. But it's going to be really, now is a really good time to control a lot of these plants. Another thing that you can do is think about your control technique, and you don't have to cut them down. If the shrubs are big enough, you can use a technique called basal bark, where you apply herbicide to the bark of the shrub and leave it stand in place to die. Or you can do a hack and squirt, and again, you just leave it standing in place to die, and then follow up with retreatment and monitoring for any seedlings.
And finally, would you reiterate, Beth, why it's a bad practice to actually pull vines off trees after you cut them?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, some vines like English ivy, they have those adventitious roots that can, they slightly penetrate the bark. So you could rip some of the bark off when you're pulling them off. And then if there's any like widowmakers or other dead branches in the tree that you're pulling the vine, they can come down on you. And then some of those vines are really heavy, and if they come down on you, they could cause an injury too. So it's just better to leave the vine in the tree to prevent damage to the tree, and for your own safety. The vine will die and decompose on its own. It's just extra work that you don't need to do.
There you go. There you go. There's one last question. I think we've got just another minute or two.
Okay.
About spiny amaranth. This is not a plant I'm familiar with. So I wonder if we're having a terrible time with spiny amaranth in our fields and fence lines. Suggestions for getting rid of this?
Oh, this is not a plant that I'm familiar with at all.
Okay.
So if this person wants to send me an email, Nancy has put my email in the chat, beth@blueridgeprism.org. Tell me who you are and your question, and I can help do some research. And one, I'll learn more about this plant too, and maybe help you to find some answers. I'm sorry, I can't answer that now.
Oh, that's great. And maybe this is a good wrap up for those of us who have had the experience of some of these plants becoming too rampant in our garden. Greenbrier is a native butt. Am I the only one really can't handle it in my yard and shrubs? Will the native gods smite me?
That's a really good question. And I would offer the same advice for any, like poison ivy is another good example of it. It's a wonderful native vine that is beneficial to wildlife. It has evolved with our natural communities here, but not everyone can tolerate it in their yard. So, control it where you absolutely can't tolerate it. And you could also say this about grapevines, because we get a lot of questions about controlling native grapevines. But if it's somewhere where you can tolerate it, if it's off the trail, deep in the woods, if it's not bothering you, just leave it alone. So don't feel too bad. I'm not going to shame you, and the native plant gods won't smite you. But always, keep in mind that these plants do offer benefits to native birds, insects, and they have a role in our natural community. So do your best.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I've been known actually, because my Virginia creeper was spreading everywhere in my garden, to take down the big vine and let other smaller ones come back up behind it and
that's a great strategy.
Contain it to one tree and not to another.
Yeah,
So
that's a
I
really
think
good strategy.
we could make choices. And
yeah, certainly. Like in my own yard, I can't allow any poison ivy in our yard because my husband is so sensitive to it. We can't have it. It just is. And I don't feel bad, him not going to the hospital is more important.
Indeed. Well, thank you, Beth. You have been gracious
thank
and
you.
generous in answering so many questions and in making yourself available to so many of us this evening. We really appreciate a wonderful presentation you've done. Virginia?
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, thank you ever so much, Beth. You're just a terrific partner. Really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to share my screen because we have a webinar to announce.
Great, yes, thank you everyone for this wonderful webinar this evening. I've learned so much. Please join us again to continue the learning. Tuesday, November 9th at 6:15, we'll have the last webinar of our 2021 series. Our speaker will be Carol Heiser, who recently retired from the Virginia Department of Wildlife Resources, where she was the Habitat Education Coordinator and Education Section Manager. Carol will bring our webinar series to a close, emphasizing our key messages, that every yard makes a difference and native plants are the backbone of a healthy conservation landscape. She will outline the key principles for using natives to protect soils, improve habitat, and keep our waterways clear. And so with that, thank you all and have a wonderful evening.